Hello there, welcome to Real Talk, teachers and young people, drivers of change on CSE and SRGBV. My name is Dennis Glasgow and I'm a member of Transform Education and I'll be moderating this morning's session. Just a few logistics before we get into our program today. You can enter your questions in the link provided, the Q&A link provided on the screen. This event is being recorded, so please remember that. This event is available in English, in Spanish, and in French, and you can switch language, or you can switch the language or the interpretation using the globe icon at the bottom right corner of your Zoom screen. And for persons who are speaking in Spanish, buenos días a todos. Este evento está disponible en inglés, francés y español. Puede cambiar de idioma haciendo clic en el icono del globo taraqueo en la esquina inferior derecha de la pantalla de Zoom. Thank you very much. I'll introduce our opening remarks, which will be from the Assistant Director General of UNESCO for Education, Ms. Stefania Giannini, and we'll head straight into our program. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dennis. It's a great pleasure for me to join this Real Talk today, and thanks for having me on such an important subject for education, health, and well-being. Well, there is indeed a growing recognition, amplified, of course, during these unprecedented times we are living because of the pandemic, of the interconnection, interrelationship between education, health, and well-being. And we know that healthy and happy learners learn better. It's simple like this. Efforts to promote this interplay, this interconnection between health and well-being through education are really critical now to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals on good wealth and well-being, which is SDG 3, and quality and inclusive education for all, which is goal number 4, as well as contributing to other topics, other goals in the 2030 agenda, like, of course, especially gender equality, goal number 5. Having said that, let me share with you some reflections coming from our experience on the ground, data we collect as UNESCO, as the leading agency on SDG 4. Well, gender-based violence in and around schools is unfortunately a widespread phenomenon impacting the lives of children, of teachers, families, communities around the world. From a psychological point of view, we have to say that they really can have a long-term impact. And from psychological abuse to physical violence, sexual harassment, school-related gender-based violence comes in many forms and affects actually children in every region and country. So we can say, to summarize, that it's a kind of worldwide phenomenon. As with all forms of violence, it violates children's rights, basically, and it's a significant barrier for girls and boys' access to education and to and the barrier in participating in education. Given the new global targets agreed by the G7 recently in the UK to get 40 million more girls into school and 20 million more girls reading by the age of 10 in low and lower middle income countries by 2026, so we have 5 years in front of us, addressing school-based violence through evidence-based interventions is more important than ever. And this is my first point I wish to highlight. Schools are actually a strategic site, a strategic place in which to actively promote a gender-responsive, respectful, and non-violent culture. We realize more than ever in the last 18 months within this pandemic that schools are not simply places to learn. Of course, this is the mission of schooling, but they are very much places where children must find their own dimension in a protect, secure environment. UNESCO has documented that alongside our other interventions, curriculum-based programs are central to preventing and addressing SRGBV, as well as challenging harmful gender norms and broader awareness of gender equality, inequality in society as a whole. Well, comprehensive sexuality education provides young people with the knowledge, with the skills, the aptitudes to develop and sustain positive, healthy relationship and protect themselves as well from unsafe situations. Also strongly supported during the recent Generation Equality Forum here in Paris, in which UNESCO actively, in which UNESCO actively participated recently. With this framework, CE, young girls and boys learn actually to treat each other with respect, the dignity from an early age, and to understand how the decisions they make can affect themselves and others in a long-term perspective. All young people learn to think about what is right and safe for them, and how to avoid coercion, how to identify what violence looks like, including sexual violence, and to understand injustice based on gender. And this is very much important. I think this is the first step to build inclusive, resilient societies. Last month, we had the preview of our recent strategy on comprehensive sexuality education, which is the CSE Global Status Report, which highlighted the fact, I tried to wrap up a very complex and interesting report. I encourage you to have a look to, the result, the main result is that well-designed and delivered curricular interventions situated within a comprehensive approach can help shift harmful social and gender norms. And they can promote gender equality, they can reduce rates of gender-based violence and all other forms of antisocial behavior. So I think it's an investment to do now to have a long-term result. We have documented the example of some countries. I wish to mention Zambia, for instance, where a new teacher training model was developed in 2019, 2 years ago, using teacher training colleges and education hubs that provide pre-service training to teachers. And this is about the role of universities in taking this responsibility and carrying on the wealth and the burden of being one of the main actors in building new ecosystem for education. More or less the same in Chile. We documented the research that shows how providing teachers with the right support and quality lessons really help them to demonstrate a strong gender perspective. It is another important dimension of the work we are doing. Well, it's a kind of intergenerational dialogue. It's very much exciting. And it brings together teachers, young activists from Africa, Latin America, discussing some of the challenges and ways forward on concretely on comprehensive sexuality education and school-based, gender-based violence. So to really conclude, let me say that healthy and educated children and young people achieve their full potential and their countries achieve better social and economic growth. So this is the purpose we have all together today. Thank you very much. Dennis, over to you.
Thank you very much, Stefania, for those exciting words of introduction. Just a reminder, this is Real Talk with teachers and young people who are the drivers of change in comprehensive sexuality education and school-related gender-based violence. So just on the screen right now, we have a code. So we're asking you to head over to slido.com and just scan the code on your screen if you have any questions. So we'll keep bringing the slide up throughout the entire run of the dialogues. So if you have questions for the speakers from Argentina or even our speakers from Zambia today, please feel free to use the information provided on your screen and scan the code that you can see right there and ask your questions. I hope you're just as excited as I am to learn more about comprehensive sexuality education and what's happening across the world. In today's conversation, we'll be hearing from Argentina and from Zambia, as I mentioned. And we wanted to head directly into this first conversation. And in this conversation, we'll be hearing from two amazing persons from Argentina. We have Maria Soledad Vasquez, who's a teacher and who teaches comprehensive sexuality education in Argentina. And she's also a member of CITERA, and that's the Confederación de Trabajadores de la Educación de la República Argentina. Joining Maria is Natalie. Nati is a 22-year-old feminist law student and the founder of Cat Calls of Buenos Aires, a part of Chalk Back, an international youth-led movement committed to ending gender-based violence, street harassment with public chalk, digital media, and education. And I wanted to hand you straight over into the capable hands of our first two panelists.
Bueno, buenos días, muchas gracias por esta invitación para participar de
for this invitation to be part of this amazing space. I am really, really grateful. I'm really excited to be here today. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much. I also want to thank everyone in Transform Education for giving us the opportunity to talk to you today and offer you a little bit of perspective of what's going on with CSE in Latin America. Very well. As a teacher, yes, I am a teacher. I teach SRGBV for teachers. So my work is related with training teachers around topics of sexual education, about eliminating gender-based violence. So people who have already graduated become teachers, and we offer them training. So I'm a train the trainers trainer. And this is a quite interesting experience, both personally and generally speaking, because everything happens inside a classroom. In our country, we have a series of rights related to reproductive and sexual rights. This thanks to a long-standing fight. So these have been small battles we've won, and that make the Argentinian population very particular in comparison to other societies, because we've clearly have moved forward in sexual education thanks to the activism performed by many groups. So now we have a better reproductive and sexual health based on autonomous decisions. However, this doesn't mean that we have completely overcome all violence or different conflicting situation related with gender-based violence. Yes, as Sole is mentioning about, for instance, pleasure and enjoying yourself is a new conversation we are having in our country. This conversation has gone to the parliament and it's been discussed among different power entities. And we need to vanquish this perception that sexual education is a hidden topic. The topic talking about women's pleasure is a hidden topic as well. And so this is something we need to discuss constantly in the education community, not only made up by grown-ups, but also young ones, children who have a lot to add to this conversation. When I was in high school, for instance, from 15 to 18 years old, I did not have access to SCE, and been great to have had sexual education. So as Sole has mentioned, we've won small battles. We have abortion is now legal in our country, and now we have greater tools in order to broaden the law for CSE, which was passed on 2006, so that we can have a way more comprehensive and complete CSE. What happens when we talk about sexual intercourse? This is something important that we would bring to the classrooms so that children can ask themselves what happens to their own bodies, to their decisions when they decide to share this space with another person. In our society, as we've already mentioned, we've moved forward, we've won some battles related to sexuality. However, we still see limits, we still see hidden topics, as Nati mentioned. Last week, for instance, for many people, these are very uncomfortable conversations, but for some other people, no, they're not. So the national government purchased what a so-called wooden penises. That's how we call them. This is not a new strategy. It's been a long time since this had been implemented. These are cases with different devices, educational items in order to teach sexual education. And one of these items are wooden penises in order to teach how to use a preservative correctly. And it was a huge scandal. This was really polemic. The media were going crazy because of this decision, which was basically part of the public policy related to these topics. So yes, these topics can still lead to ironic laughs, to nervousness, and this goes hand in hand with other situations which show the gap that we still have between the actual application of the legal rights in the design of public policies, the allocation of budget for these public policies, and the cosmovision and practices in the daily lives of people. Yes, as Saule has mentioned, the fact that something as basic as this educational item became a huge scandal lets us know that this should have been figured out back in the 90s when we started the conversation about preventing HIV. So we have many, many, many things we need to figure out. This is something we should be able to talk freely with a health professional, but not only in health. This does not only relate to being healthy and doctors and hospitals. This also relates to schooling, to education, and to our rights and to our laws. We also talk about mental health. So this is a very, very comprehensive topic we should discuss in order to continue applying the law. As Sole, many teachers have already implemented many things, but another important thing that we've seen in our country, just to provide some background about the different institutions and the different things we are doing as a society. When we started talking about feminism back in 2015, there was a huge movement in Argentina called Ni Una Menos, which reivindicated past fights related to feminism, and this brought about everything related to young people and children. When we talk in Argentina as scratches, we refer to the fact that some media share pictures of children, of young girls that suffered sexual violence because, for instance, they went to a party and some guy decided to touched her, and this came to Argentina, this came to the discussion in a moment where a lot was going on. So that helped us move forward in this sense again, but we still need to bring together the CSE law in order to make sure we can continue talking about gender aspects, because due to the patriarchy, we still suffer gender-based violence. Now, in order to highlight some positive aspect, our law has just celebrated its 15 years. This is something quite iconic. And yes, we have really enriched our law related to sexual rights. So that's something positive to highlight. So first of all, it's the fact that we have a law. For good or for worse, no one can deny that there's something called comprehensive sexuality education, and that provides educational spaces. This is a part of the curriculum, and for primary school, for kindergarten, this is also part of the curriculum. Although this is more complex, there are different ways in which you can address this. So it is a right, it has been reivindicated, and whenever this is not respected, it raises concern. And as I previously mentioned, this means that we've taken some steps forward. Because if we cannot even name what's going on, what's happening to us, then I would say that our situation is quite severe. But we still play with this. We need to, yes, have an acknowledgement of comprehensive sexuality education, of the need of living a life free of gender-based violence, but this doesn't mean that we have reached our maximum potential. Yes, I think something very important is in schools is asking ourselves, not only ourselves, but also children, when we talk about sexuality education, is that we need to constantly ask ourselves and others what happens, what's going on when they don't know how to use a condom, when they do not know what's going on when they share a space with another person, when we talk about same-sex relationships. So yes, we still can enrich in this conversation, and we can continue working around all these questions we ask ourselves, because this is not taught in school. For instance, schools does not teach children how to have a relationship with a same-sex partner, because heterosexuality is something that's assumed. However, when you're gay, you need to clarify that. So that's another step we need to take if we want to enrich in the conversation between and the link between teachers and students, so that this is an ongoing question and not everything is taken for granted.
Thank you very much for your conversation, your contribution this morning. It was interesting hearing the Argentine experience and talking about some strides that you have made as it relates to laws being there to provide comprehensive sexuality education, while still highlighting the need for continued conversation and involvement, and actually the implementation of as well. I want to remind you that if you guys still have any questions, please use the link provided to ask your questions. We'll get to them as soon as we go to the Q&A segment. And we definitely want you to keep engaged and keep involved on Twitter using the hashtag Education Shifts Power. So if something stands out to you and you want to tweet about it, don't feel shy to do so. We'll get around to seeing them soon too. I want to introduce you to our second dialogue that we'll be having with participants from Zambia. And the first speaker is Miss Agata, who works around with the Kabulonga Primary School in Lusaka, Zambia. And she'll be accompanied by Dr. Natasha, who's no stranger to me. Hi, Natasha, how are you? And she's an international sexual reproductive health and rights advocate and a medical doctor with more than 8 years experience in SRH advocacy at a regional and international level as well. She's very passionate about the empowerment of women and girls, as well as their being integrated and involved in family planning, SRH, and menstrual hygiene management in adolescent health programming. So I'm really interested to, follow the conversation that they'll be having, as well to share their context in Zambia. Do remember, if you have any questions, you can send them over to our to the website slido.com and use the code that was provided in the chat. And I'll hand you straight over to our speakers. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dennis. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Natasha, and based on that introduction, I won't go deep into introducing myself, and lovely to be on this call. I'd like to pass gratitude to the organizers for inviting me, and I'll hand over to you, Teacher Agatha. Might need you to unmute. Perfect.
Good afternoon. It's afternoon here. I don't know what time it is up there. Like I was introduced, this is Teacher Agatha, a teacher from Lusaka, Zambia, Kaulonga Primary School. Very passionate with child education and also issues surrounding SRGBV and comprehensive sexuality education. I've actually have a profile. I've been teaching for 14 years now, and I started my teaching from primary school, advanced to secondary school as a social science teacher, and also as a career guidance and counseling and placement officer at my school currently. I've done a lot of work with UNESCO in relation to the CSE program, and here we are now today, ready to have this talk. Over to you, Natasha.
I'm really curious, Teacher Agatha, what has been your experience when working on CSE and SRGBV in Zambia?
Unlike our friends from Argentina, we're still in our prime with the program, the CSE program, though we've made a bit of strides here and there. Originally starting the program for CSE started in 2014 here, and I was lucky to be one of the first teachers that received the initial training. Before the training, I really had no much idea, because I'm coming from a generation where we have a lot of myths and taboos here, and a lot of things that we grew up not talking about. Actually, I think the first CSE experience I had from my parents, and we were threatened to, we did not do certain things because we were threatened. I think the first CSE I had from my grandmother was that I was told that if you have sexual intercourse at an early age, your hands will start growing longer than the legs. Actually, my mother, I remember once told me that if you have sex at a young age, actually just sitting next to a boy at a tender age, you could fall pregnant, and it worked for us. But then I realized with the coming of CSE, and then today's generation has a lot of information out there. If I gave that information to a child today, they'll just Google and say, can I have develop long arms if I have sex at an early age? And they'll be lying to them. So for the information that we have to give to them now, thanks to UNESCO that brought in the trainings, we were empowered. Now we have information, and we also have books that we use in the program from 2014 to today. Some of us who are lucky to be trained, we have the experience, and then we have the material that is age appropriate, culturally acceptable, and also scientifically accurate. So it is easier now for me in school, being a counselor and also having been trained to carry out CSE, it's easier for me to talk about issues. Back then, when you talk about SRGBV, my understanding was just maybe concentrating on the victim, the perpetrators, ignoring the victim. But now this time I understand that the victims of SRGBV also need help, because there's a psychological aspect involved there. And now I handle better the issues, and we are gaining, we are winning actually, because we are seeing a lot of change from the time the program was introduced. We are seeing a lot of changes. I'll give an example, like on the school where I am, like maybe 7 years ago, we used to have like maybe 10 pregnancies per year. It's not a very big school. So that was a very big number. With the coming in of comprehensive sexuality education, we noted a drop in the number of girls that are falling pregnant, maybe 0 to 1 or 2 at the most in a year. And even these children that are falling pregnant, there's a backup program that the Ministry of Education here has come up with, where there's what we call the re-entry policy. This is a program which allows a girl child who falls pregnant 3 years after when they deliver, they're allowed to go back into school. So we are winning. And then it's easier now to have children reporting issues of SRGBV than it was earlier before the training, because some would fear that they didn't have a protection. Now we know how to protect the victims and also how to help the perpetrators. Thank you.
Wow, that sounds interesting. You know, issues of SRGBV and sexual and reproductive health and rights are usually not talked about in schools. And coming from a teaching background, I'm sure you might understand that some of these topics remain hidden. So how do you think young people and teachers can overcome silence around SRGBV and issues of sexuality education?
Thank you very much, Natasha. You are very right. I think you understand our background here in Zambia, like I earlier mentioned. There are a lot of taboos and there are a lot of myths. And then we also have, you know, we have the religious connotations. There are certain things like discussion. Our Argentina team there, they were talking of wooden condoms. We cannot do that in schools here. It cannot be allowed because what we do here, we have a level where in school, there's up to a level where I can teach. I cannot dispense condoms. I cannot actually dispense family planning tablets. So for such, we have to do a reference to maybe child-friendly corners. That's where you, Natasha, come in with the organizations like yours. They come in because at least you're at liberty. You can give those to children. But in school, I cannot even, like in a high school where I'm teaching here, I cannot even do that condom demonstration here because also apart from just the religious connotations, we also have these cultural sensitivities where there are certain things that you cannot just talk about in our culture. For example, in the modern society today, when I'm talking to somebody, to make sure that the person that I'm talking to is really getting my information, I'm supposed to look at them straight in the eyes. In the cultural setup, if you're talking to somebody, an adult is talking to a child, and the child is looking straight into your eyes, it is regarded as rudeness and stubbornness. So you see, but then now these are some of the things that we are trying by all means to try and break away from that training. And then we have people like me who've been in service, like and Stefania mentioned that the pre-service training for CSE in Zambia, he only started in 2019. So for a person who left college like me a long time ago, the only training I've received is thanks to UNESCO. We've been empowered here, we've been given skills and knowledge, but it's not everyone who is in service who has that skill to talk about those issues. So we still have teachers who cannot talk about these issues openly. So what we are encouraging right now, what is working for us is we cannot work independently now, for now. We cannot afford. So teachers who feel they can't talk about certain subjects, we actually encourage that they can come to a teacher like me who's been trained, who can talk about these issues openly, even in their classes. We can co-teach. I talk about those issues where they are not comfortable. But what we are crying for is that even those teachers that are in service now should be considered for training. They need skill training so that at least we have a number of teachers that can speak on those issues. And then there's a lot of resource right now, like in our school, what we've invested in. If you walk into my school, it is a talking school. We have in our walkways, we have messages that were made by children. That's how we've involved the children in SRGBV and CSE issues. We have placards along our pathways, which talk about different issues that were made by the children themselves. And also on our walls, we have messages that speak to every age group in our school. So that is the involvement, and also we form clubs, co-curricular or what we call extracurricular activities that are supposed to be done, because during our curriculum, the CSE that we teach is just in particular subjects where we integrate. It's not actually a standalone subject. So we need to do more after school, and we also refer children to child-friendly spaces like where you found Natasha, where they can have all the information more than what we can give here. So that is how actually we are helping to enhance SRGBV so that children can understand, and we are seeing change. Children are actually interested. And now for teachers also, we encourage, there is documentation out there. I like the document on the global address that was done by UNESCO, the UNESCO team in 2016 during the 16 days of gender activism. There's a document that is actually, it's in English, it's in French and in Spanish. You can find it online. We actually, as a school, we use that document. It talks about how to end school-related gender-based violence. So teachers can, don't be an island. Go out there, you can actually find information. Talk to these young ones, they have a lot of information. They have myths and taboos that also maybe some other wrong information that we can clear. As if we are knowledgeable, we can talk to them and also help to bridge that generational gap that is there between us, older teachers, and the younger one.
You know, it's very interesting when you say that I like your approach, because you are giving us solutions of things that have worked in your school and things that you're seeing in your communities. One thing I've seen in my work so far is that young people, well, we encourage young people to ask questions. So the teachers will be silent, but we will be asking. We will be asking the teachers. And what we find is that, like you said, young people have a lot of information. This is an information age. While our parents may be timid, the young people we work with ask us. For example, when we go out in communities distributing pads on our menstrual health programs, the boys are always asking us, but why didn't you bring us something? Okay, you should have brought us condoms or something just to show that you also care about us. So there's very interesting conversations. And just for some context, for those that may be listening from other countries, in Zambia, when it comes to CSE, we do have it integrated in subjects, and it's an examinable subject as well. And that's very interesting. But I'm very curious to know, because now we're living in a COVID era and schools have been closed for some time. Well, they've been closed for the most part of the year than open. And I'm sure, Teacher Agatha, you can attest to that. When we did our research based on the COVID numbers last year at Copperos, we found that young people are frequenting youth-friendly spaces much more. We saw a 70% increase in traffic at the youth-friendly spaces that we support. And as a teacher, what do you think are the opportunities there in dealing with young people, and in terms of collaboration between NGOs and teachers? Are there any opportunities that you think we're not taking advantage of in the country?
To be truthfully speaking, there are a lot of opportunities that you're not taking advantage of. There are teachers like have been sleeping. I don't know for how long you wake up to just do personal stuff, your own personal. There's human resource that we can provide. There are teachers like me who are trained, who are passionate about issues of SRGBV, issues of CSE that you can utilize. We have the manpower. What we lack is resources. We also lack gadgets that we can use, and also young people. If you come to my school, it's actually in the center of the city, but at the end of the day, you find that the majority of children that we have here are from poverty-stricken families. They cannot afford internet. So if groups like the NGOs can work together with the government and support such initiatives where they can provide maybe free internet that can be used, also provide gadgets like cell phones, and also provide laptops. We can arrange situations where we can be meeting these young people, and also via radio programs that are already existing. You can take advantage of radio programs, TV programs, to integrate the actual curriculum with the CSE program that everyone can be winning at the end of the day. Thank you very much, Natasha.
Thanks. And I can see Dennis back on. It shows that our time is up. Over to you, Dennis.
Thank you very much. A lot of interesting conversations there. So thank you guys for providing that context as well. Don't forget, if you have questions, to put them here. But I was interested to hear about the context in Zambia and how different and how and some of the differences and similarities between what's happening in Argentina. It was interesting to hear that CSE is actually examinable in Zambia and also, integrated in other subjects as well. It was interested to hear, even though that happens, there is still some setbacks as it relates to sharing contraceptives and certain sort of doing content demonstrations and these sort of things in the school. That was interesting to hear. So while you've made some strides, there is still some setback, and some of the questions that may come up may bring this up again. But at this point in time, I wanted to thank all of these speakers this morning. And I wanted to ask the speakers from Argentina if they have any questions for Natasha and teacher Agata. If you have any questions for them, let's for the English speakers, you can switch over to hear the translation of the question that the Argentine persons may have. But do feel free to pose a question to them, and then afterwards, let's hear from Zambia if you have any questions to better understand the Argentine experience as well. And let's make this an interactive session to learn. Over to anyone from Argentina who wants to ask the question. Okay, I don't think that they have any questions, but do you guys from Zambia, do you have any questions that you want to pose to our colleagues from Argentina at this point?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Well, it was very interesting listening to the Argentina team and just hearing what some of their successes have been. And for us, it's fascinating to see that you are even allowed to have the wooden models in your classes and in your interactions with students. We are just curious to know, seeing that you've made a lot of progress with, for example, the abortion law and other similar legal structures, what are some of the challenges that you are facing in implementing CSE and SRGBV, and how are you dealing with these? We've heard some of the successes, but are there any other successes you'd like to share and challenges that you're facing in your work? Thanks.
Bueno, en realidad, como desafíos.
Well, talking about challenges, we could spend hours and hours sharing different experiences about these challenges, but there's something relevant I'd like to share based on what you just mentioned. This idea of the myths and prejudices, which are these preconceived ideas we grew up with within our families, within our communities, and in different educational settings. And sometimes it's hard to get rid of these ideas. So Nati, they were saying that if you had sexual intercourse, your hands would grow large. So Nati is younger than I am. So there are probably differences in our, because we come from different generations, but there's also a myth that children are brought by the stork. Children not come from a pregnant, well, in order to explain, even in the 21st century, how a child is born, we are told that they are brought by a stork. So this is an idea that's widely spread and that continues to be reproduced, and this poses an obstacle to understanding sexuality and pleasure. So there are small situations like this stork example that still happen around us. For instance, in kindergarten, there's this idea that there are toys for boys and toys specifically for girls. So there's games and toys that are for girls so that they can play to become mothers, to have a baby, to look after this baby, and boys play wrestling. They they pretend to develop, I don't know, things related to strength. And when we see that there are some toys that question these prejudice, then the discussion comes into place. What happens when a child considered a boy decides to wear a dress and play uh, the pre to be a princess? Yes, we need to get rid of this binary culture. We need to understand that we are part of a wider diversity of of bodies, people bodies, sexualities. And this brought to mind Sole. I was already 18 years, but when I was 18 years old, I went to a 3D printing center and I saw a clit. They printed a clitoris in order to show how the clitoris was made up. So it was really cool because when you touched it, it changed colors. So I think these are great ways of getting to know our own bodies in order to fully acknowledge and recognize them. It's about exactly acknowledging, not about falling into the stork story to paint a beautiful reality, which is knowing how our bodies work and loving our bodies and loving ourselves, because this is what we have. This is how our body works. And we want to grow up in a world when I am not marginalized because of my sexual preference or my appearance. So I think this is a very important discussion we need to have at school. Another limit, another very important challenge, no one talked about the fight in 2015 with this Ni Una Menos campaign, not one less. This posed a huge opportunity to have the first political debate around this, which became abortion, which became a law last year. In these 3 years, we had two simultaneous political fights. These were very, very strong social movements, that not one less, ni una menos, and the fight for the legal abortion. These were two key moments in our history that gave place to discussions around CSE. And there was this group of families called Con mis hijos no te metas, which is don't mess with my children, translates into don't mess with my children. So what did these families intend? Well, they forbid their children to have access to CSE. They didn't want their children to have access to this kind of materials at school. And well, this basically cannot be done. However, this was a group that had a lot of influence, a lot of political power, and so they issued different documents which parents needed to sign to say, I do not authorize my kid to receive materials or talks or information around comprehensive sexuality education. This, of course, had no
just in the interest of time, we're gonna have to jump in quickly and move on. Sorry for interrupting. But thank you very much for your contribution. You answered three of the questions posed in the chat, actually. So thank you very much for doing so. I'm gonna ask my colleagues from Zambia quickly, both of you in under a minute, if you can tell me, how are you countering opposition to CSE in Zambia? And we know this is a global movement, but what are some of these, what can you share with us of your experience countering opposition in Zambia? Quickly, if you can. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Just like some of the challenges that our friends have mentioned, we equally have some of challenges maybe from the traditional aspect, where we have the CSE platform. We do not only work with the government, we also work with other organizations. So we brought on board religious groupings, we've brought traditional leaders, the members of a community. So we've had challenges where there's misinterpretation of information to think that comprehensive sexuality education is all about teaching children how to have sexual intercourse. We currently have had issues where we have people like who trying to actually say this program has to come to an end because they misquoted what has been taught. Misinterpretation of information is what really we are fighting currently. There, like in Zambia, actually, if gayism is a crime, if you are found to be involved in a gay relationship, you're actually imprisoned. So those laws have been considered when actually drafting the comprehensive sexuality materials that we are using here. But then we have out there where misinterpretation of this information to think that we are actually talking about, we are actually teaching children instead of teaching them how to say no and how to say no emphatically, because that is what CSE is. Actually, the thought is that we are actually teaching children immoral behavior that can lead to moral decadence in our nation. So opposition has come from there. We also work with civil societies, religious leaders. These civil societies have been helping actually to support the government and to actually make sure that the people out there, the other people that are opposing this program, understand truly what this program is all about, because the program is good and we are seeing changes, because we are seeing numbers of HIV rates, infections coming down. We are seeing pregnancy rates coming down. We are seeing children actually learning how to respect each other, the boys and the girls, knowing that there is no one who is above the other. They are actually equal partners who can work together in order to advance their education. So we are scoring a lot of in that area. With the
I just want to make a small addition. What has helped us succeed also is the integration, because it is integrated in other subjects. Even when there's resistance, uprooting it is very difficult, because they can't just, they have to change the whole curriculum in order to remove CSE. And that has been the greatest success, I would say. Another thing is also involvement of parliamentarians, because when the opposition came from the crowd, because parliamentarians understand why it's important, it's been so much harder to remove from the curriculum.
And just to add one point to Natasha.
Okay, in the interest of time, we really have to move on, but we want to encourage you guys to join us on Twitter. We are approaching the hour, so we're asking you if you can stay just a few more minutes. Please continue this conversation online. For those of you who use Twitter, please use the hashtag #EducationShiftsPower. We really want to continue this very rich conversation. And thank you very much to the team from Zambia for underscoring the importance of having a multi-sectoral approach and a multi-sectoral involvement with parliamentarians, faith-based leaders, civil society groups, and teachers in order to counter opposition. Thank you very much for sharing that with us. And I wanted to ask you to remain. We have an exciting presentation, a poem coming up later, but right now we're going to head into some remarks from Naomi from UNESCO in Malawi to share some brief reflections with us today.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning to those who are in the morning areas. My name is Naomi Montali, and I'm with UNESCO, and I'm based in Malawi. UNESCO has been working closely in partnership with the Minister of Education in Malawi, and I would like to talk a little bit about some of this work that the ministry has been doing in comprehensive sexuality education and school-related gender-based violence in recent years. This rich discussion has brought to the fore the real and practical need as well as application of life skills and sexuality education programs in addressing school-related gender-based violence. We have seen that teachers and young people alike believe that these are important interventions that have an effect on more equitable and safer learning environments. As has been emphasized by the UNESCO ADG for education and other speakers, the links between education, health, and well-being of learners cannot be ignored. The Global Education Summit that opens tomorrow is also set to highlight the need for gender equality in and through education by challenging the norms and assumptions to accelerate gender equality. In Malawi, the Ministry of Education has implemented a life skills education program that focuses on issues of comprehensive sexuality education, but also school-related gender-based violence issues. Learners are equipped with knowledge and skills that enable them to deal with issues of sexuality or gender violence of any sort. A lot of learners are not free to speak up when their rights have been violated, but also they assist each other when the need arises. However, there are still challenges as a lot of learners are dropping out of school due to early and unintended pregnancies. The ministry has undertaken to strengthen its life skills education program to address emerging issues like sexting and cyberbullying after a situational analysis of comprehensive sexuality education in primary schools and teacher training colleges, which was carried out by UNESCO in 2019. The government has also provided guidelines on safe schools to ensure that teacher training colleges, schools, and community environments are safer, healthier, and more inclusive for all learners. Considering the positive impact that these interventions are bringing to schools, the Malawian government is investing its resources and time in scaling up these interventions. Many different stakeholders are involved in these efforts. So these intergenerational dialogues today have shown us how important it is to continue such conversations so that countries can find homegrown solutions to the problems at hand. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for sharing and for your insight today. And at this point, I would like to invite Ali Nafe, who's a spoken word poet, to share a piece with us.
Hello. So hi everyone. My name is Alinafe Malonje. I am the co-founder of Wana Collective here in Malawi. Wana Collective is one of the youth-led networks under Transform Education. So the poem I will be reciting today is called Speak. It's written from the perspective of a young girl in school who has experienced gender-based violence and she doesn't know how to talk about it. And that's made even harder by the fact that everyone around her is telling her that it's normal. This guy likes her, so it's okay. And I kind of drew from experiences in high school where I am a young woman, of course, and I had a lot of friends who were dating older guys, and that was normalized because apparently girls mature faster. And there's so many myths and norms that we need to distrust. And there's so many things that we need to change. And that's what I was thinking of when I was writing this, like how do we safeguard? How do we create safe spaces for girls in schools? And how do we make sure that school is a place that they feel safe to go back to? So the poem touches on issues of also anxiety and depression after the fact. So this is Speak. I'm not sure when I lost my ability to speak, but I dream of a world where I find my words. or rather a world where my words finally find me, a world where my voice is finally heard. I'm not sure when my hands began to shake, but I think it was around the same time I lost my voice. I've been biting my nails in class and making them break. It's hard to stop in a world full of noise. I'm not sure when I started being scared of the dark. It must have been around the time my hands started to shake. You can't switch the light off when the whole world's falling apart. How do you sit in a dark room and pretend not to break? I'm not sure when I lost my laugh, but I think that's where this all began. When it happened and everyone looked at me and asked, did you enjoy it? Never mind, you must have, he is your man. My man. So I laughed my last laugh as a child, and I let myself be pushed into womanhood. And all this anxiety began to pile as I lost my voice and forgot all things good. I let this fear of school consume me, as it no longer was the place that kept me safe. These walls that I'd once trusted were now the very thing that made me ache. I convinced myself that they were right, that I enjoyed it and I was a woman now, that I was happy and didn't need to cry. I loved him, I wanted him around, that this pain was in my head. I wasn't scared of the dark, that what happened was fine and right, that this whole world isn't falling apart, that I didn't need my voice and shaking hands are normal, that boys can take what they want and being too loud isn't called for, that I shouldn't think too much about it. I shouldn't remember how it felt to lose my words, my choice, my voice, to all at once lose myself. I'm not sure when I lost my ability to speak, but I think I need to find it again. I need to get these words out of me. I don't know how and I don't know when. How do I even begin to say what I need to say? How do I know that this place will be safe? How do I say, no, I didn't enjoy it? How do I say, no, I am not okay? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alina Faith from Wana Collection for this beautiful piece. This is why comprehensive sexuality education is so important, because it allows students to keep and to strengthen their voice. It teaches people and young people, especially young men, about consent and how to and persons to identify violence and how to recognize injustice and have that voice to speak up. So thank you very much for that piece. At this point, I want to thank all of the panelists for their insight, for their knowledge, and for their experience today, from Argentina and from Zambia today, and even Alinafe for that beautiful piece once again. And I want to thank all of the people behind the scenes working to make this event possible, from our partners. A massive thank you to the co-organizers, Plan International, Transform Education, UNESCO, Ungain Education International, that have been hosting side events all week, addressing a plethora of issues around, school-related gender-based violence, comprehensive sexuality education, and education. And I'm really excited to see what, is in store for us coming out from this as we head into the Global Summit this week. And I want to remind you guys to continue to keep this conversation up on social media, using the hashtag Education Shifts Power on Twitter, and tagging Ungai, tagging Transform Education, and really keeping this conversation around school-related gender-based violence and comprehensive sexuality education active, especially as we head into this particular week. Let's keep those hashtags trending on social media. Thank you again for your time and for being here with us. Do have an amazing rest of the day or evening wherever you're from. Thank you.